And as promised, Dr. Adrian Jones, Associate Professor of Sociology, is with us. Good morning, Dr. Jones. How are you?
Pretty good. How are you doing?
Good. Good to talk to you today. As glad to have somebody in every Wednesday here from Kent State Tusc. So tell us about sociology, first of all. We think we know what that means with the word social in it, but what exactly does that entail? And maybe a little bit about how you got interested in sociology.
All right. Well, it's a tricky question when you try to actually pin a definition on sociology. I think I actually have somewhat of a working definition. Sort of changes every time I give it. I think. When I was an undergraduate taking sociology courses, people would always ask, what is sociology? And I think I had a sort of stock answer and basically said, sociology is the study of groups, and then I sort of ended there. And and really, sociology is really broad. So I'll give you some other definitions that I might use, in the classroom, sort of borrowing from other people. Sociology is a general science of society. Sociology is the science of social institutions. Sociology is the science of collective behavior. Sociology is the scientific study of social life. Sociology is the science of social phenomena. So these definitions are really focusing on these sort of broad aspects of society.
Right.
So a lot of sociologists study sociology at large and see it as a thing of its own sort of interest. So regardless of people within, a lot of sociologists see society as sort of taking on a life of its own, and that's their focus. So they might look at changes in economic systems over place or over time, and make conclusions about these larger social changes in society. But other definitions and a lot of other areas of focus of sociology are a lot more about smaller social relationships. So for example, Henry Fairchild defines sociology as a study of man and his human environment and their relations to each other. And then another sociologist says sociology is a study of systems of social action and their interrelations. And so a lot of us, again, might look at some of the smaller scale sort of interactions we have in society and might ignore, the larger institutions. But as a whole, the general definition that I give the class is that sociology, in my intro class, sociology is the scientific study of human behavior and the social context in which it occurs. Mm-hmm. So basically what, some of us do is like myself, we'll look at behavioral outcomes, for example, I look at adolescents, but we might look at it, any adults, children, or whatever, and look at, what makes people tick, what types of, behaviors, come out of that. Similar to psychology.
Yes.
But again, a lot of us on the other end are looking at these larger scale, situations in society. And the true really promise of sociology, the real goal that we want when we teach sociology is to teach people, the connections between their individual biographies and the larger social, aspects and social life of society at large. Mm-hmm. Because essentially we're all sort of placed in these social locations, these social structures, particularly when it comes to things like race, class, and gender. And that's going to shape our opportunities. And so that's one of the things that I like to point out, and really that's a main theme of sociology in general is, we might behave a certain way or we might think a certain way, but, our behavior and our attitudes, it's not occurring in a vacuum. There are these bigger sort of underlying currents in society that's really shaping our realities, shaping our opportunities, and so on. So that's the point that I like to make is really I'd like my students to see the societal patterns that influence individual and group life.
So I guess I need to ask what kind of courses are offered on campus, because I think we see a direction where you're going, but what are some of the other options, I guess, or variances that you have?
Oh yeah, I teach quite a few sociology classes. Most of my students are my intro students, so a lot of them are just passing through because it's a general requirement, liberal education requirement. Mm-hmm. So I get about 200 students a year who take intro. Then I have, other than that, I have mostly upper level classes, so junior and senior level. So let me look at my list here. see. Today I'm actually teaching a class called Inequality in Societies, which is pretty relevant to the times, I think.
Yeah.
A little bit later, I'm teaching a class called Deviant Behavior, which is actually my specialty. And when I went through my PhD, I specialized in criminology and deviance is my area of interest. So that's one of my favorite classes to teach. Let's see. Again, sociology is so broad. I'm all over the place. I teach a class on death and dying. So we look at the cultural aspects of how we process death at the individual level, for example, how we deal with coping, but also at the societal level, how different cultures handle death and process death. So It's really a fun class. It's one of my favorite classes.
Right.
I bring in people from the community. They come in. So, for example, Ann Guy will come in from a dive and talk to my students and stuff about the industry, and I'll have my students plan their own funeral, and it's pretty neat. So some sociology is healthcare related. So I taught a class, not only the death and dying is healthcare related, but I also taught a class called the sociology of health and healthcare. So a lot of my colleagues, particularly up at the Kent campus, they focus specifically on health related outcomes, where I'm more the deviance guy. But anyway, what else do I teach? I teach the methods classes. I really like research methods, so statistics. I teach class called data analysis, where they learn basic statistical analysis, how to process data, and they actually learn a program called SPSS, which is a program that we use to analyze social science data, like survey data, for example. So I teach that. I teach a class that teaches them basically how to collect data, the advantages and disadvantages of all the different data collection techniques and so on. So everything about methods, which is very important for any of my students that go on to grad school. You really have to have a background in statistics and sociological methods.
I was going to say, you can see where there's so many different branches and so many different businesses that could use this kind of person or this kind of data. So the possibilities with a sociology degree must be very, very large, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, because we're so broad. If you're interested in healthcare, sociology would be a good start for that. If you're interested, you want to go to law school. Some of my students have done that. Sociology provides a good background for that. A lot of my students are interested in health services and social work, which a lot of students, sociology students, get into social services. In fact, looking at a statistic here, around 26.5% of graduates in sociology get involved in social service occupations, which means they probably need to go get another degree enough to get a licensure, but that's what a lot of them do. But yeah, I'm thinking like management, marketing. They have a good background to get into that.
Right, anything to do with demographics, right?
Oh yeah, totally. In fact, there's a whole area of sociology that just looks at organization. So these guys are really good, and if they want to get into marketing or they want to be involved in management and consulting and so on. We're all over the place. Still, there's still a lot more classes that I teach. I teach a class on social problems.
With all these classes, let me just interrupt you. This is Dr. Adrian Jones, Associate Professor of Sociology. A, how do you have time for research projects? And B, can you fill us in on maybe just one that you're kind of involved in right now?
Oh, yeah. Well, the time is an issue, especially now that we're moving everything online. Basically, that's all I've been able to do. It's a lot of work. I used to be to just walk into a classroom and teach, a class about deviant behavior. Now I spend 4 hours a week prepping it. But so I'm kind of put on hold for a second. But, it's tricky. On our campus, we're a teaching faculty. So our main job is to teach, whereas my colleagues up at the Kent campus, their big thing is research. So they teach a lot less classes than I do, but they do a lot more research. But I'm still required, to do still a decent amount of research. So I have about 5 projects going on right now. I use a data set called the Project in Human Development Chicago Neighborhoods, which collected 10 years of data collection, collected data about Chicago neighborhoods and about data about 6,000 kids who they tracked over 3 different time periods, so 6 years of their lives. So what I do is I'm a neighborhood guy, so I like to have variables that look at neighborhood characteristics and variables that also look at in these kids, for example, their level of self-control or whatever. And then I like to see how these factors relate and sort of work together in predicting things like substance use, delinquency, and crime. Basically, I'm a number cruncher. So I have these large data sets that I create variables and run mathematical models to see what's really going on. More recently, my most recent research project that's still evolving quite a bit is I decided to look at more of the positive. It gets kind of depressing looking at negative stuff all the time. So now I'm looking at positive youth development. So I'm looking at these respondents, the study that I look at, as they move from adolescence to young adulthood, what type of factors shape healthy lifestyles? So, for example, refraining from drug use, going to college, taking on a career, doing health, sort of positive health behaviors, and so on. So I'm really sort of starting to look at more of the positive. So what makes people thrive? And actually, that's sort of the terminology, the type of literature is it's called thriving. What makes people thrive? So
well, that sounds like a good way to go. I mean, at least you don't come out feeling depressed all the time.
Yeah, I don't research stuff that really makes me angry, like white-collar crime or political corruption. I mean,
okay.
I want to be as objective as possible, so I stay away from those guys. I really study stuff that I just see raw numbers. I really don't care too much about what's going on. But I think this thriving stuff is pretty important. If we could really sort of work in the specifics of what really makes people thrive, hopefully we could help a lot of people that need help. So one of the things I find, for example, is kids who live in disadvantaged neighborhoods not only lose the resources that the neighborhood would offer, but they're often less likely to have parental support, support in their schools, and so on. All these things that would help them thrive basically are not abundant in terms of neighborhoods. If you go to a more positive, economically positive situation.
Right. We're speaking with Dr. Adrian Jones, the Associate Professor of Sociology. Hey, by the way, it's good to have you at the campus, and so much information. If somebody needs to get in touch with you or would like to, what's the best way to do that?
Oh yeah, email me, and you can get my email from the faculty profiles on our website. But it's amjones4. So A is in Adrian, M is in Matt, Jones 4. And I would love to talk to anybody who's considering sociology, and tell them what courses they need, where they could go, what types of things to expect if they want to go to grad school, that kind of jazz. So.
Oh yeah.
I love talking to my students who are feeling out their careers. We have a few sociology majors, not a whole lot. A lot of my majors are double majoring. A lot of them are also majoring in psychology or criminology. In fact, I'm really trained as a criminologist in my research, so I teach the required criminology classes. So a lot of my students will double major in criminology and sociology. So and they'll go in and work in the legal system or in corrections or things like that. But anyway, yeah, I love.
All right. Well, we'll have them get a hold of you. Does that sound good?
Cool. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Great.
Hey, thanks for being on with us this morning. We really appreciate your time and your information.
All right. Have a good one.
You too. Thanks a lot. That's Dr. Adrian Jones, Associate Professor of Sociology from Kent State Tusc Ross, here on Tusc Talks on our 830 High Beam.